It was a warm summer morning in Travelers Rest, South Carolina, a quiet town where people still left their doors unlocked and neighbors looked out for one another. Among the well-respected members of the community was 80-year-old Edna Suttles, a kind-hearted woman known for her generosity and independence. On August 27, 2021, Edna followed her usual routine. She had breakfast, checked on her garden, and then told a friend she was heading out to help look after someone in need. She had done this many times before, always willing to lend a hand to friends or neighbors who needed assistance. But this time, Edna never came back. Hours passed, then an entire day. Her phone went straight to voicemail, and no one had heard from her. At first, those who knew her assumed she had gotten caught up in errands or was staying with her friend longer than expected. But by the next day, it was clear that something was wrong. When Edna missed an important engagement, something completely out of character, her concerned friends decided to call 911. They reported her missing and requested that authorities check her home. Police arrived at her house expecting to find some explanation for her absence, but what they discovered only deepened the mystery. There were no signs of forced entry. The doors were locked, and nothing inside suggested a struggle had taken place. Yet, something was clearly off. Edna's safe was open, and nearly $50,000 worth of jewelry was missing. Even more concerning, her car was gone. If Edna had simply gone on a trip, why would she leave her house in perfect condition but take nothing with her? Days later, investigators made a chilling discovery. Her car was found abandoned in a hotel parking lot. There was no sign of her inside, no indication of where she had gone. Surveillance footage from the area didn't show her returning to the vehicle. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. As investigators dug deeper, one question haunted them. Who was the last person to see Edna alive? The answer to that question would uncover a disturbing truth. Police were about to discover that this wasn't just a missing persons case. It was something far more sinister. As investigators retraced Edna Suttles' final movements, they turned to one of the most powerful tools in modern crime-solving, surveillance footage. Edna's abandoned car had been discovered in a quality parking lot, but there was no sign of her anywhere. Police needed to know who left the vehicle there. The answer came from a different location, a Food Line grocery store parking lot. August 27, 2021, 10:12 a.m. A security camera captured a seemingly routine interaction. Edna was seen picking up a man, Daniel Prince, in her car. At first glance, nothing about the footage looked suspicious. She was calm. There was no struggle, no sign of distress. But hours later, the story changed. August 27, 2021, 3:26 p.m. A different security camera, this time outside quality, showed something disturbing. Edna's car pulled into the parking lot. But this time, Daniel Prince was driving it alone. He parked, stepped out, looked around, and then walked away, leaving the vehicle behind. Edna was nowhere to be seen. August 28, 2021, 6:48 a.m. A third piece of footage sealed his fate. This time, Prince was caught transferring something large and heavy from Edna's car into his own SUV. It was wrapped in a blanket or fabric, but it was clear the object wasn't moving. Authorities feared the worst. By now, one thing was certain. Edna Suttles didn't just disappear, and Daniel Prince was hiding something. Police needed to act fast. They had the footage. They had the suspect. Now, they just needed to find him. And when they did, they would uncover something even more horrifying. As police pieced together the evidence, one name kept coming up: Daniel Prince. The man last seen with Edna Suttles was no ordinary suspect. When investigators dug into his past, they discovered a dark and disturbing history. August 30th, 2021, 9:15 a.m. Authorities publicly named Daniel Prince as a person of interest in Edna's disappearance. They issued a warrant for his arrest, but they needed more than just circumstantial evidence to bring him in. So, they started investigating his past. What they found was shocking. A criminal history that went unnoticed. Daniel Prince wasn't just any man. He was a convicted felon with a violent past. Decades earlier, in the early 1990s, he had been arrested, charged, and convicted of kidnapping a woman. His crime had been so severe that he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. but in a move that would later haunt investigators. He had been released early. Now, decades later, he had struck again. September 2nd, 2021, 7:42 a.m. Authorities had no doubt Daniel Prince was the key to finding Edna. With a warrant in hand, a SWAT team was deployed to his residence. At exactly 7:42 a.m., heavily armed officers moved in, surrounding Prince's home in a quiet, rural neighborhood. They approached cautiously. Prince was known to have a history of violence, and they had no idea what he might do. Using a loudspeaker, officers issued a warning. "Daniel Prince, come out with your hands up." There was no response. After several tense minutes, officers forced entry. Inside, Prince was sitting on his couch, showing no signs of resistance. His demeanor was chilling. He didn't ask why they were there. He didn't panic. He just stared at them in silence. "We need you to come with us." Prince didn't fight. He simply stood up, put his hands behind his back, and allowed himself to be handcuffed. But the unsettling part? He never asked why he was being arrested. His calmness sent a wave of unease through the officers. It was almost as if he had been expecting them. But what was inside his home would send chills down their spines. Because Edna wasn't the only secret Prince had been hiding. September 2nd, 2021, 10:15 a.m., the beginning of the interrogation. After his arrest, Daniel Prince was brought to the interrogation room. He was calm, too calm. Most suspects, especially those with a criminal past, would be nervous, asking for a lawyer, or outright denying involvement. But not Prince. He sat silent, staring ahead, hands cuffed to the cold metal table. The two detectives assigned to the case, Detective Carlson and Detective Hughes, knew they had to break him. "We need to talk about Edna Suttles." Prince tilted his head slightly, but he didn't respond. "You were the last person to see her alive." Nothing. The detectives expected resistance, but Prince's lack of reaction was unsettling. It was as if he knew this was coming. They decided to change their approach. 10:35 a.m., the first confrontation. Detective Carlson placed a printed photograph of Edna in front of Prince. A still image, taken from the Food Line surveillance footage. It showed Edna picking Prince up in her car. "That's you, isn't it?" Prince shrugged. "Yeah, that's me." "And Edna? What happened to her?" Prince leaned back, his expression blank. "I wouldn't know. Haven't seen her since that day. It was a lie." And detectives had proof. 11:12 a.m., the video that changed everything. The detectives had planned for this. They rolled in a TV screen and pressed play. First, the footage of Edna and Prince in the parking lot. Then, the footage of Prince driving Edna's car alone. And finally, the most damning piece of evidence. A grainy black and white video from the quality in parking lot. Prince opening Edna's car. Prince reaching inside. Prince pulling out a large, heavy, motionless object wrapped in cloth. Prince loading it into his own vehicle. Detective Hughes paused the video. "Explain that, Daniel." For the first time since his arrest, his demeanor changed. His jaw tightened. His hands fidgeted slightly against the cuffs. The silence dragged on for several seconds. And then he spoke. "All right, I'll tell you what happened." 11:45 a.m. The truth begins to unfold. Prince leaned forward slightly. His voice was steady, his tone almost casual, as if he were talking about something insignificant. "Edna invited me over. We were talking, everything was fine. Then she got sick." Detective Hughes narrowed his eyes. "She got sick?" Prince nodded. "Yeah, she wasn't feeling good, so she laid down. Next thing I know, she wasn't breathing." The detectives weren't buying it. "So, let me get this straight. You just happened to be with her when she died? Just like that?" Prince shrugged. "I panicked. I didn't know what to do. So, I moved her." It was another lie, and the detectives knew it, because they had one more piece of evidence that Prince had no idea existed. 12:30 p.m., the evidence that destroyed his story. The detectives stepped out of the room for a moment, leaving Prince alone. When they returned, they were carrying a small plastic bag. Inside, a yogurt cup. "Recognize this?" Prince stiffened slightly. It was the yogurt cup found in his house. And inside, a mixture of drugs, strong enough to sedate a person completely. Detective Carlson leaned in close. This wasn't natural, Daniel. You drugged her, didn't you? You made sure she couldn't fight back. Prince exhaled slowly. Then he nodded. Yeah, I did. But that was only the beginning. 1:15 p.m. The serial killer's confession. What happened next would leave detectives speechless. Because Edna wasn't his first victim. Prince tilted his head slightly, his eyes cold, detached. You think this is the first time? Detective Hughes's breath caught in his throat. What do you mean? Prince leaned back. And then he started listing names. Dolores Sellers, Nancy Riggio, Lee Goodman. 4 confirmed murders. For lives stolen. And yet, he showed no remorse. They all trusted me. And they all died. For years, Prince had been living among ordinary people, hiding in plain sight, while carrying out unthinkable crimes. But now, he wanted something in return. 2:30 p.m. The deal that should have never happened. With 4 murders confirmed, prosecutors were ready to push for the death penalty. But Prince wasn't done negotiating. I'll tell you where Edna is, but only if you take death off the table. It was a cold, calculated move. Detectives had a choice: take the deal or risk never finding Edna. And faced with that reality, they accepted. Prince agreed to move his case into the federal system and reveal the location of Edna's remains. With that, a serial killer got exactly what he wanted. Prince had spent decades hunting victims. How many more were there? How did the system fail to keep him behind bars? And most importantly, was justice truly served? April 2022, the courtroom battle begins. After months of investigation, confessions, and legal maneuvering, Daniel Prince was finally set to face justice. The courtroom was packed. Families of the victims sat in silence, waiting for answers. Prosecutors had a mountain of evidence. Surveillance footage of Prince moving Edna's body. His own confession linking him to 4 murders. Physical evidence, including the drug-laced yogurt cup used to sedate Edna. But despite everything, Daniel Prince wasn't facing the death penalty. Thanks to his plea deal, his case had been moved to the federal system, ensuring he would never be executed. For the victims' families, it wasn't enough. They wanted justice, and they wanted to see Prince pay the ultimate price for what he had done. April 22nd, 2022, the verdict is read. After weeks of testimony, the jury returned with a verdict. The courtroom fell silent as the judge read the charges. Guilty of the murder of Edna Suttles. Guilty of the murders of Dolores Sellers, Nancy Riggio, and Lee Goodman. Guilty of unlawful disposal of human remains. But then, the sentencing. Daniel Prince was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Some in the courtroom breathed a sigh of relief. Others? They were furious. Because for them, life in prison wasn't enough. Prince had stolen 4 lives. And yet, he would still wake up every day, eat meals, breathe fresh air, and live out his years behind bars. For the victims' families, the justice system had failed them once again. Where is he now? Today, Daniel Prince is serving his sentence at ADX Florence, a supermax federal prison known for housing some of the most dangerous criminals in America. He spends 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, locked inside a tiny cell with no contact with the outside world. He will never be free again. But even behind bars, one question remains unanswered. Were there more victims? For years, Daniel Prince hid in plain sight. A convicted kidnapper, released early, allowed to roam free, until he struck again. How many more monsters like him are walking free today? And how many more will the system fail to stop before it's too late? A convicted killer behind bars. But was it enough? With Daniel Prince sentenced to life without parole, many believe justice had been served. But for the families of his victims, the pain didn't end when the trial was over. They had lost their loved ones forever, while Prince, though locked away, would still wake up every day, eat meals, and breathe fresh air. For them, a life sentence wasn't enough. The fight for tougher sentencing laws. Edna Suttles' family, along with the families of Prince's other victims, pushed for change. They wanted stricter sentencing for repeat offenders like Prince, people who had already committed violent crimes but were released early, only to kill again. One major question remained: How did a convicted kidnapper get released so early, only to become a serial killer decades later? Public outrage over Prince's case reignited debates about parole policies and sentencing guidelines. Some lawmakers even proposed Edna's Law, which would ensure violent criminals with prior convictions never get the chance to reoffend. But until laws change, how many more victims will suffer because of repeat offenders? Where is Daniel Prince now? Today, Daniel Prince is serving his life sentence at ADX Florence, the most secure federal prison in the United States. He is locked away in a tiny, windowless cell for 23 hours a day, with no chance of release. He will die behind bars, but the damage he caused can never be undone. For the families of Edna Suttles, Dolores Sellers, Nancy Riggio, and Lee Goodman, justice may have been served, but the pain will never go away. This case leaves so many unanswered questions and moral debates. Do you think the justice system failed by releasing Daniel Prince early? Should repeat offenders automatically receive life sentences without parole? Was life in prison enough, or should Prince have faced the death penalty? Do you believe there are more victims that police haven't found yet? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. This is a case that still haunts investigators, and your opinion matters. Call to action. Support the channel. If you love true crime, hit that subscribe button. Like this video if you believe justice wasn't fully served. Leave a comment. Do you think repeat offenders should ever get a second chance? Share this video to spread awareness and support stronger laws for victims of violent crime. New true crime documentaries every week. Stay safe. Stay aware.